What's up, everyone? Great to be here. 1 week before the trials for a lot of you. If you are year 12 in New South Wales, maybe you're tuning in from a different state, different year group, but this should be helpful for you no matter what, because we're going to go through some super practical tips based on your questions. So to start off with, for those of you who have already joined, please do send through some questions. Let me know what you're focusing on at the moment if you're preparing for your exams, especially if you're doing trials in New South Wales. Let me know what your concerns are. What do you guys need help with? What are you unsure about? How can I be of assistance, if at all? Very curious to know what you would like some help with. So please start commenting away in the comments. I'm here for an indefinite amount of time, really. We'll see how active the chat is tonight, but we're very close to the trial. So I imagine if there are any year 12 students jumping in here, it should get pretty active. I'm sure there's a few stressed students out there. Maybe, hopefully, a lot of you are on top of all of your studies and prep. But yeah, let's see how we go helping you out here. So Samara, question coming in. Thanks for joining. I find it really hard to answer short answer questions and finding a stance to take. Well, short answers can be really difficult to answer because you don't have a lot of time to digest the text, to really take it in and understand it, let alone write a response in timed conditions. So that is tricky, but nonetheless, in terms of having a stance to take, it's all about just committing to an idea that kind of makes sense to you based on what you've understood from the text. The key is not to get caught up and think, oh, I don't understand what any of this means. I don't know what I can write. It's to actually zoom in on the parts that you do understand, even if it's just a couple of sentences in the text, and think, okay, I kind of understand that part of the text, at least. You know, those words are pretty clear. It's not too abstract or vague. And then what you do is you think, okay, based on what I understand from that part of the text that I'm looking at, how can I relate that to the keyword of the question? And you just zoom in on that, and that's your focus. So whenever you look at a text, you think, you look at a text through the lens of the key terms of the question. So if the key term of a short answer question was human motivations, so it's about motivations, then even if you don't understand the entire poem, you might be able to understand a couple of lines of a poem, like maybe the opening 2 lines and maybe a line towards the end. And you just think, how did they relate to motivations? What type of motivations? And that will give you everything you need almost always to actually write a full response. You just lean into the thing that you do understand about the text and about the question. So you always make the question work for you. Don't feel like there is some objective answer out there that you are meant to find and write about. It's all about, can I come up with something that makes sense based on a part of this text and that actually relates to the question, and you just have to commit to that. The other thing that will make it short answers a lot easier is always knowing the structure that you need to use. So if it's a 4-mark question, then knowing that, okay, it's 4 marks, it's 4 sentences. I've got a topic sentence that I need to write, which provides one specific idea relating to the text and the question. And then I need 3 examples, different techniques that I can also talk about in relation to the question. But that's all you need. You need 4 sentences for a 4-marker. A lot of students, without that structure in mind, end up writing like 6, 7 sentences that aren't that high quality because they don't have any focus behind what they're doing. They don't know how much is enough. So it's really important that you memorize those structures. You know how much you need to write as a bare minimum to get the marks. And I would stick to the bare minimum as best as possible, because that is a sufficient amount of sentences to get the marks, and you don't want to waste any more time when you've got other questions to answer. So in terms of actually how to answer those, one thing I would recommend everyone watches is look at the breakdown that I did. It's on YouTube, how to get full marks in section 1, I think it's called. I think I go through the 2023 one, and we're releasing later this week, I think by Saturday, the 2024, whichever one I haven't done. That will come out and show you exactly how I would walk through every single question of the section 1, paper 1 exam. So that should be helpful as well. But I definitely look at the YouTube video and watch how I would approach all of that, because it's just about getting through it. Section 1 is all about being time efficient and not wasting time. And that means you need to know how to get the most out of the little that is there, right? So, okay, I only understood a couple of sentences in that text. Fine, at least you can get a technique out of that quickly. You can say something that connects to the question. That's all you need. Then move to the next part of the text and so forth. I really like the layout of your study planner. However, I only came across 2 weeks from my trial. Is there any way to condense it? I understand that the whole thing might be unrealistic. Yeah, so as time kind of ticks on and you get closer and closer to your exams, obviously that 5 or 6 week study plan becomes less and less viable. So what you want to do is continue to prioritize the things that ultimately matter. For English, the thing that ultimately matters, if I had to pick one thing, it's going to be having a base draft essay for each module. So if I only have 2 weeks left, my focus becomes creating those, hopefully having them already done, but editing them and timing them and cutting them down so you can definitely write it with time to spare on the day, 32 to 34 minutes. I would be focusing on doing that for each of my essays. So I just have to do 3 of those. Same for craft of writing for my preferred writing style. So maybe it's a discursive, maybe it's an imaginative, and then, do a practice paper for section 1, watch my section 1 breakdown video, memorize some techniques that you can use to quickly find things. That's all you're really focusing on doing. The thing I would be doing a couple of days before the exam, if I only had a week or 2 to do this whole process of English prep, which really is a formula, is just practicing adapting to new questions. So I would sit down with my base draft essay that I familiarize myself with. So some of you might memorize it fully. Some of you might just learn the key parts. Doesn't matter. Do what works for you. The more you know, the more you are familiar with your base draft essay, though, the better you will go on average. So I don't want you to have any doubts about that. It doesn't mean you have to memorize it word for word, but you do have to be very familiar with a base structure so that you have material to work off within the 40-minute time constraint that is of a high enough sophistication to get you top marks. So you have to have that material there. You have to have practiced using it, or you have to have learnt it. But then your main priority on the day of the exam is obviously answering the question directly. So the better you understand, or the more familiar you are with your draft essays, the better you'll be able to refocus your attention on the day to the new question. So a couple of days out from the exams, this Saturday and Sunday for some of you, I would be sitting down with a few different questions for each essay, and then trying to rewrite my introductions and topic sentences again and again. They are the most important parts to practice adapting. Every sentence of your introduction should be addressing at least 1, if not 2 key terms of the question. They should be directly referring to them. So you're making it clear to the marker how you are responding directly to that question. And you should in fact be doing that. But the best way to do it is to practice looking at different questions, force yourself to take what you have from your base essay and reword it and rework it so that you're still fundamentally saying the same thing that was in your original, but you're saying it in different terms. You're emphasizing different things now because you're now pulling in the keywords from the new question. So you need to get familiar with that process of adapting, because that will teach you the parts of the sentence that are most adaptable, where you tend to change in the sentence, and the parts of the sentences in your draft that tend to always stay the same no matter what the question is. And they're the things that will really save you time on the day, because you'll find that some parts of your essay, some parts of each sentence are more adaptable than other parts. Okay, so going through that process of looking at practice questions, forcing yourself to write new introductions and topic sentences. Don't worry as much about everything else if you're time constrained. That's going to give you the most bang for your buck in terms of preparing you for the day of the exam. So base essays, just getting that base essay, cutting it down, being the person who actually times it and has the discipline to cut it down to 32 to 34 minutes so that you aren't one of those people who run out of time despite hearing that message from me or maybe someone else again and again and again. I always say it. If you do it, you put yourself in a good spot. It's a shorter essay as well. It's easier to learn. And then looking at new questions and writing new introductions and topic sentences using the exact key terms of the question, but also trying to preserve as much as you can from your original argument if it works. That skill there is going to be the thing that pays off the most on the day. So I would just be focusing on doing that in this last week or 2, depending on when your trials are. What are the cliches in discursive writing to avoid? How do you write a unique discursive? Well, in terms of what you write about, I mean, there are some ideas that I try to steer away from, like writing about your experience at school. Teachers tend to not like those school-based ideas. Writing about, oh, what's it like to be a student at high school? Sure, maybe that is the most authentic personal experience that you have for a discursive, but it doesn't make for a very interesting read. Having said that, I would try to differentiate myself with a discursive or an imaginative or a persuasive, not by what I'm writing about, but more so by how I'm writing. So it comes down to the quality of the imagery, how your voice is a little bit unique. So something I would recommend you all do is play with your sentence structures. Maybe you need to have really long sentences at the start to convey a certain emotion or point, and then you need to have really short sentences after, maybe to convey an anxiety or a sense of kind of relief or resolve, anything that matches up with the tone that you're trying to convey. So long sentences, short paragraphs to keep things engaging. Play around with those things. Also, with a discursive, it's really good to have a stream of consciousness style. That will help you stand out. That means that when I read your discursive, it sounds conversational, but also it sounds like you are kind of sharing your thoughts as they happen. Okay, so that would result in a lot of shorter sentences and longer ones, because you're just showing your stream of thoughts, your stream of consciousness as you put them to the paper. So that creates that authenticity, and having that highly personal voice and authentic voice will help you stand out as well. So there are a couple of tips, if you will, for how you can stand out in the way that you write, mixing up your sentence structures, using a very conversational style that's relatable, but also using that stream of consciousness style, which again is like your thoughts are being put onto the page. It doesn't feel super structured. It's a little bit unpredictable, but it's authentic to the voice. So that's what I would say there. In terms of the best ideas for a discursive, I like discursives that are about the nature of writing or the nature of creation of some kind of artwork. So some kind of artistic focus, whether it's, how do you become a good writer, or what types of writers are there? What's the difference between fiction and nonfiction? Where do ideas come from? Let's explore the imagination. Where does art come from? Is anything truly original anymore? All of these kind of topics hopefully are things that can align somewhat with one of your prescribed texts. I always make sure there's some similarity to a prescribed text for Module C that I've looked at. But overall, I like ideas that are to do with the nature of writing or the nature of some kind of art form. Could be music, could be painting, could be, again, just something connected to imagination. They're the kinds of things that come up quite often with different stimuli. And I find that can help you stand out. I also like to write in a meta-fictional way. So with discursive, acknowledging that you are the person writing the discursive, that it's you, it's coming from you, right? As I sit here now writing this, having that kind of language creates that meta-fictional quality, whereby the person you're writing about, or the speaker of your piece, is aware of themselves as the speaker. That can also create a cool quality to it. So there's a bunch of ideas there. You don't need to use all of them. But if something works with what you already have there, maybe that will help enhance the quality of it. Echo. So does the quote number of each essay actually matter? Is it fine if I have 8 quotes instead of the traditional 9 with 3 per body? Yeah, like 8 versus 9 is not going to make a big difference. I think there is a noticeable difference if we're talking about examples between, say, 12 examples and 8 or 9 examples. So it ultimately will depend on the speed of your writing. And this is why you have to time out your essays, because even though it does matter how many pieces of evidence you have at a certain point, it doesn't matter if you're not going to have time to write it. So there's no point in me saying you need to have 12 quotes or 12 examples, 12 sentences of analysis, if when you time it out, it takes you 40 minutes. 40 minutes, you only get 40 minutes and you have to adapt to a new question. So that's too long. So if you can only write an essay that has 8 or 9 examples, core examples, then so be it. At least you're going to have a full essay. And yes, you could still get full marks with that. 8 or 9. I mean, that's probably the minimum if you're really contending for a band 6. I always would aim for 12 examples, I suppose. But even when I was doing that, I ended up cutting a couple of those out. Maybe I'd be more in the kind of 10 to 12 range. But let me tell you something. It's not really about when I say 10 to 12, if we're thinking about that as quotes, remember, you can have multiple quotes per sentence. So it's more about sentences, because sentences are what take up a lot of time. If I have to do a whole new sentence of analysis, then that is going to take up more time. So doing 12 of those is really difficult under timed conditions. So I would always aim for up to 12. But what I would do more so, I might have like 20 quotes in my essay. This is what the best students do. How do you have 20 quotes in your essay? Because you've got maybe 8 or 9 key quotes that have the techniques, but then you're embedding small short quotes, like one-word quotes, short phrase, into the rest of the sentence to go with that other core quote. So you can use quotes as almost a complement to your analysis. So when you're explaining what another quote means, you can embed maybe a one-word quote from the text to supplement that. So if you can try and use multiple quotes per sentence and break up your quotes a bit more so they're shorter and not these huge, like long one-sentence quotes, which just teachers are so sick of that and it doesn't flow as well. If you can use shorter quotes and use multiple quotes per sentence, then maybe you can get 20 quotes in your essay, but still only have 9 sentences of analysis, 3 core sentences of analysis per paragraph. So that's like the 8 or 9 that you're talking about here. But again, you could still have an extra quote per sentence. Doesn't mean you have to add another sentence. You have an extra quote per sentence, and suddenly you have 16 to 18 quotes in your essay. That's going to be far more impressive. So worry about adding more secondary quotes into your existing sentences than adding a lot more full sentences of examples with more quotes. Hope that makes sense. I think that's going to be a lot more efficient for you, and it's going to help avoid you trying to jam in more stuff that you're not going to be able to write in time on the day. Is it better to memorize discursive and persuasive, or be able to instead learn to convert imaginatives into them on the spot for less memorization? Okay, so let's think about the assumptions you're making with this question. Is it better to memorize discursive and persuasive, or be able to instead convert imaginatives into them on the spot for less memorization? So you're contemplating a situation where you might actually memorize 3 different responses, a discursive, a persuasive, and imaginative, and you're asking, well, can I just memorize the imaginative and just know how to change it into a discursive or change it into a persuasive? I wouldn't necessarily think about it like that anyway. I think this conversion thing is important, but my approach for Module C would be to learn one core piece based on your preferred type. It doesn't have to be imaginative. I actually find discursive to be the most versatile text type, if I'm being honest. That doesn't mean if you like doing an imaginative, prepare the imaginative as if you were going to get the choice to do that. But that's the one I would fully memorize. Now, again, memorize, if you're not someone who can memorize things word for word, or you don't feel comfortable doing that, or you feel like you'll be tempted to just rewrite it exactly and not answer the stimulus, then don't memorize it word for word. But take what you will from this. I would just learn or familiarize or memorize one core piece based on my preferred text type. So for me, I'd probably do a discursive. And then I would have practiced rewriting that core idea, core kind of piece from the discursive form into a persuasive form. Going from discursive into persuasive is actually quite easy compared to going discursive into imaginative. Discursive into persuasive just requires largely a change of tone and modality. So discursive is often more conversational. It's a little bit more kind of equivocal or ambivalent. Let me give you a cleaner word. It's not super definitive and saying, hey, this is what you have to believe. It's more contemplating an idea. Could be this, could be this. That's a discursive. Could be, maybe, might. Persuasive is like, this is how it is. And then there's repetition. And it's a lot more definitive, and it is trying to persuade. So the tone changes and becomes much more certain, but you can basically still write exactly what you were writing before. You just have to frame it in a more definitive way and throw in some rhetorical questions, repetition, and use more high modality language like must, might, always, never, versus perhaps this, maybe this. That's the discursive one. So there's largely there's a tonal shift or difference between a discursive and a persuasive, but you can often retain a lot of the material that you had in that base discursive. When it comes to the imaginative, that's the thing that often takes a little bit more thought and preparation in terms of having a kind of an imaginative option. And you definitely need to consider what you would do if you got asked only to do an imaginative. Because if you prepared a discursive and they say you must do an imaginative, which can happen, and it has happened in the past, then you need to know how you would approach that using your existing draft, or you need to have a plan B. But if you only want to learn one response, then learn your preferred type and practice adapting it into the other two. I just went through discursive to persuasive. How would you go from a discursive to an imaginative? Well, you preserve the same core concern. So I would be practicing exploring the exact same issue, but you need to create a narrative around it, meaning you need to have character and there needs to be a set-in. So yes, that's the significant chunk that will be different. And I would really practice, I would actually rewrite a new kind of opening for the imaginative piece. And I would probably learn that, to be honest, to definitely have that in the bank. So I would have my core discursive. I would have practiced adapting it to a persuasive, knowing I don't have to change that much fundamentally. It's just the tone. It's just the general feel and style throughout that I need to tweak, and I'll practice doing that. But then for the imaginative, I will prepare an alternative opening to create a kind of narrative where I start right in the middle of action. There's a moment of tension with my character, but what it goes on to explore or portray in that moment is basically the same concern as the discursive, and I'll use as much as I can from that. But you do need to consider it, sit down and practice doing it, and that will tell you how much you can kind of reuse or recycle versus how much new stuff you need to be ready to use. But yeah, end of the day, have one key one that you're confident with, that you enjoy writing. So for me, discursive. Practice looking at the other two types, so persuasive and imaginative, and think about what you would do in different situations. And if you need to prepare a little bit more for, say, the imaginative, because it's a harder one to convert, then so be it. That's what it'll take to kind of have that ultimate insurance. You're all trying to prepare for worst case scenario. What if I got the one text type that I don't like? Well, you do, if you've considered it and you've at least sat down and written a kind of alternative opening, at least you've got something to work off. So you prepare yourself for all those situations. All right, Jake, I have trials in 1 week and have not finalized a draft for any essay, but I do have an essay plan for all modules. What should I focus on right now? Great question, Jake. I'm sure a lot of students are in this situation right now. Trials in 1 week, you haven't finalized a draft, but you have an essay plan. Okay. I would try and mock up a fully fledged draft essay for each of those. It sounds like you've got plans, so you've probably got evidence, you've got some arguments. I hope you've got examples and things like that grouped together. But force yourself to actually sit down and just create, or maybe you just use the plan and respond to a question you like. Choose a question, your favorite question, perfect question for you on the day. Choose that question and force yourself to write a full essay using your plan. And then that's the base essay you can work with, because obviously you're running out of time to continually refine an existing draft. So put yourself in a situation where you have applied that plan into one essay, and then familiarize yourself. I would just go through the process now each night of learning all the core material from each of your plans, which have been converted into a fuller draft. And the way you might want to learn that is by looking at your topic sentences, memorizing those, and then just memorizing the quotes, because obviously you need to know the quotes exactly, memorizing the technique, and memorizing the kind of key word of the effect that's going to help you analyze it on the day. You don't need to memorize the whole sentence. If you're in a situation where you feel like you can't do that, then at least memorize for each paragraph the key idea. And I would try and push myself to memorize the topic sentence, so you've got a really strong start. And then I would memorize you can use it as a table, a technique, quote, the exact quote, and a key term in what you want to say about it. What's going to trigger my memory about what I wanted to say. And you can just do that 3 times for the 3 pieces of evidence that you have for that paragraph, right? And then you do the same for the other ones. So that would be how I would more efficiently go about preparing here. But the end goal is the same. You need to be as familiar as possible with those core pieces so that you are faster on the day responding to the question. Okay. Now, the one caveat to what I just said, I said try and learn the topic sentences and then at least know the technique, the quote, and a key word in terms of what you want to say about it as the effect, because that's going to form your analysis. I would really stress, you should push yourself to memorize the introductions. So write a really good introduction for a practice question for each of those 3 essays. Spend most of your time doing that for any further preparation on the actual drafts. Get those introductions. The biggest mistake students make is they go, oh, well, I don't know the question, so I haven't bothered learning an introduction. It's like, are you kidding? That's the most important paragraph, and that's the one you chose not to learn ahead of time. I would first and foremost learn the introduction, because that is where you're going to already put yourself into a band in the marker's mind based on how sophisticated you sound. Of course, you need to answer the question, and that's why people say they don't bother preparing something, but you still need your argument. You still need to cover all of these things. You need to introduce context. You need to introduce form. You need to introduce all of the key points that you want to raise in your body paragraphs, which again, you've already prepared and learned. So a lot of the introduction can be preserved and reused, but you will have to change a lot of it as well. But why not have that base? Why not already have that great vocabulary that you'll most likely be able to reuse a lot of the time? You won't know exactly where you need to adapt because it will depend on the question and how well it fits into your existing draft, but you'll be able to preserve like 80% of it in most cases. So put yourself in the best position, commit to learning introductions that are of a high quality that you're happy with, really commit to that. Then I would learn the topic sentences as best as possible, but at the very least, just memorize the order of your ideas. So my first body paragraph is about this, have a key phrase for that one, do the same for the other 2 or 3. And then obviously you have to memorize the quotes and with the technique and a key word for what you want to say about it. So if you caught all of those things, that's what I would focus on learning. And then, as I said before, as you get closer to your exams, after you feel comfortable learning all of those 3 core draft essays to that extent, have a look at up to 3 new questions and practice writing out 3 new introductions and 3 new sets of topic sentences. Don't worry about writing the full essay out because you don't have a lot of time. Just the introduction and the topic sentences rewritten based on that draft that you have learned. So learn the draft material first that I just went through, then practice up to 3 questions. If you can't get 3, at least do 1 new question and force yourself to write out a new introduction using as much of the draft one as you can to try and see where you would have to change and the things you could keep. And that's going to put you in such a good position compared to if you just, went in with a vague plan, an essay plan, without anything really written out. You hadn't practiced writing the introductions or topic sentences. You hadn't really committed the evidence and the key parts of the effect to memory. I mean, it's going to be a world of difference in terms of your final result there. What is the best way to memorize my English essays? Okay, so I've got a video just to save everyone time here. I have a video on YouTube, how to memorize an essay. Just type in JeddAI, how to memorize an essay. I have a step-by-step formula for it. I memorize it like a speech. So I go through it paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, and I print it out. And I lock myself in a room with no distractions. This is literally what it takes if you want to learn it like completely. And then I read the first sentence, and then I turn the page over and I don't look at it. And I force myself to try and recall it exactly. And if I can't recall the sentence on the page exactly, I look back at where I forgot or where I got stuck. I lock that in, I say that bit 3 times, and then I try again. When I can say a full sentence without looking at the page, I move to the next sentence. And I keep doing that. And then I'll say all of the paragraph together. Once I get the full paragraph out and I can say it without looking at the page, I then write it out. So you kind of cement it in. You cement a paragraph in after you've been able to say it out loud like a speech without looking. Then you write it out because the writing just really cements it in the memory. But I always memorize essays like a speech because you can say an essay out loud 8 to 10 times faster than writing it out every time. Okay. So check out my YouTube video on that though if you want the full step-by-step. What are the highest yield JeddAI videos that are absolute gems? Love them all though. Appreciate it. That's a funny and interesting question. The highest yield JeddAI video, I guess it's subjective, right? I mean, I guess the number of views will speak for themselves. I mean, I can't I could think one video is a gem. I've created videos that I thought this is the best video I've created, and it didn't even perform that well in terms of amount of people that watched it. So I think the views tell all. I think in terms of, if I looked at the YouTube stats, some of the most watched videos of late, I mean, one of the ones is the section 1 video. I did this one, like how to get full marks, I think in the 2023 HSC. And I literally just sit down and explain exactly how I'd approach basically every question of the exam with actual examples, like typing them in. That one had, has like 12,000 views, but the average watch time was like, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes. It was a long time for a YouTube video to sit down and watch it. So those videos are definitely helpful. If I was you guys, like I would watch the videos where I break down questions, how to adapt to a question. I release these videos on like the common module questions, like how do you respond to any common module question. I think I use like 1984 Merchant of Venice Crucible examples. Go and look at what I'm doing there in responding to the question. And a lot of people often ask me, how do you respond to extract questions? When you get an essay question and they give you an extract, like a passage from the text, a lot of people freak out about that one. I have a question on how to do an extract question. I think I use Tempest and Hagseed as an example. But even if you don't do Tempest and Hagseed, watch that video, because the same technique applies to anything. And literally, if you just memorize a few phrases and tricks that I give you there, it's going to help you so much respond on the day. So, excuse me, I think some of those, like how to respond to different question videos, extract questions, and the section 1 walkthrough, right now, a week before the exam, they're probably going to be the highest yield this close to the exams. If you were learning content for the first time, I'd have different recommendations. What do you do night after paper 1 to prepare for paper 2? So between papers 1 and 2, the main thing I'm doing is going over each of my essays, so module A and B, and then my craft of writing. So I'm going over them in the sense that I'm testing my memory of it. Do I feel confident enough? I'm reading back through the drafts, my core drafts. I'm saying it out loud without looking. I'm writing down the key things, testing my memory of the key parts of it. Even if you're not learning it word for word, test your memory of those core drafts, because that is what you can rely on to give you a lot of the substance on the day. The second thing I'm doing is just looking at a few different questions and forcing myself to write out introductions and topic sentences for module A and B. I'm just doing new intros and topic sentences. I might do that a couple of times for each of them after I've read through my essays and I feel confident that I've memorized the key elements. Even if you're just doing quotes, techniques, you need to have that as a base. And then the last thing I'm doing with module C, similar to looking at different introductions and topic sentences, I'm looking at a couple of different stimuli from past papers, and I'm thinking, how would I adapt and respond to this new stimulus? Like, how could I think creatively about how to interpret this stimulus? Because a lot of people get a module C question and they think, oh, everything I prepared doesn't work for this picture, or it doesn't work for this quote. But as you might have seen in my my video, by the way, this is another recommendation in terms of highest yield videos. Go watch my video on life about how to adapt any module C composition. How do you adapt any of your module C pieces? There's a trick called life where you can choose to interpret it literally, but you could also interpret it figuratively. That's the F in life. Figuratively, you can internalize the stimulus so that what you see in the module C stimulus actually is a reflection of how the character feels or what they're thinking. That's internalizing it. And you can also externalize the stimulus, where, say you get a quote in a module C question, people think that quote, if it says continue on from this passage, people think that quote has to be said by your character, and then that might not work for the character that you wanted to talk about. Well, why not have that quote be what someone else said, and then that your character is hearing that, or they're remembering it. They're remembering what someone else said, and then you make it a motif. These are the kind of strategies. Go and watch that video on how to adapt to any module C question. And that's what I would be practicing doing the night before paper 2 as well. I'd look at a couple different ones and I would brainstorm and actually practice writing out how to adapt what I have to that new difficult stimulus. Go and look at a couple of difficult questions and think, how would I be able to respond to that? How can I think creatively about approaching it so that I can still preserve a lot of what I had? Or how can I, if you're not preserving a lot of what you had, just practice with the open-ends and really responding directly to that stimulus. So that's what I'm doing, just reviewing my core material, making sure it's up there, write it out a couple times without looking, not full essays, but write down the key, points. Maybe you got to write down the quotes, and then I would be practicing adapting to a few different questions. All right, Serenity Falls. Do the 9 to 12 examples have to be quotes, or can it be techniques too? Well, when we talk about 9 to 12 examples or pieces of evidence in an essay, you always want techniques to go with them. And ideally, you don't just want specific techniques, but occasionally you want to link it to a macro technique. So you might have a metaphor in the quote, but then it also happens to have like the word I in it, which is first person. So then you can talk about first person narrative voice and the metaphor. So sometimes you can use 2 techniques for the one quote. So yes, you always need to have a technique for a core quote. Notice how I'm saying a core quote, a primary quote, and you need to have 9 to 12 core quotes. They're the quotes that will have the techniques. But remember, I said you can have another 9 to 12 quotes that are just single word quotes or short phrases that you put towards the end of the sentence, typically, where you're explaining the meaning of the primary or core quotes. So remember, you can have more quotes than just the 9 to 12 examples. The 9 to 12 core quotes should have a technique associated with them. Otherwise, I would use one that does have a technique. And then you can try and incorporate and embed shorter quotes in the explanation part of those sentences. Hopefully that makes sense. So yes, 9 to 12 core examples should always have techniques. Otherwise, go and find some quotes or examples that do have techniques that you can see, because that's always going to sound better than not having techniques. So I would always have techniques. I would also have some form or macro techniques associated at times. And I would use additional quotes later on in the sentence, even if it's just a word or two, to further my textual engagement and show the marker that I'm really engaging with the text. Is it enough to have a good understanding memory of the main terms and concepts of the rubric for section 1, paper 1? What do you mean, is it enough? I mean, no is the short answer, because there's a lot more, and I get where you're coming from with the question, by the way, being a bit facetious with the response, but it's not enough, because you need to have practiced responding to different questions that have a different amount of marks, and you need to practice putting yourself in the situation of quickly identifying techniques in different types of text, whether it's a poem, a prose fiction extract, a non-fiction piece, even a visual text. Sometimes you don't get images, sometimes you do. But with those 4 text types, you need to sit down, force yourself to find techniques really quickly and respond to different questions. And you need to understand how many sentences you need for different amounts of marks. You need to understand how you can quickly link something that you see in a text to the key term in the question. So that's the skill set. Do you know how much you need to write for different questions in section 1? Do you know how to quickly find techniques for different text types? And do you know how to link your analysis directly to the key terms of the question in a meaningful way? If you can do those 3 things, you'll get 20 out of 20. In terms of understanding the main concepts of the rubric for common module human experiences, words like motivations, behaviors, anomalies, inconsistencies, paradoxes, storytelling, individual, collective human experiences, emotions, qualities, basically those 9 or 10. Do you need to be familiar with those? Yes, that is where the questions are pulled from. Also, the essay question for paper 1 for the common module is pulled from the rubric. So that module description, you will draw from that description, those key terms, to formulate the essay question. And the short answer questions will also be connected to it. But is it enough? No, it's one thing to go through and have a good understanding of it and practice questions that have them, and understand that the essay question will come from some part of that or a combination of key terms from it. But for short answer for section 1, you need to know, again, I'll say one more time for everyone because it's that important. How many sentences do I write for different mark allocations? 3 marks, 3 sentences, 4 marks, 4 sentences, 5 marks, 5 sentences, 6 or 7 marker, treat them the same. They're a mini essay, 1 sentence introduction, 2 short body paragraphs, 1 sentence conclusion. I've got, I cover this in that recent trials live stream that I published, right? And I think I published just that specific section, but I would know the structure. I would practice, I would revise techniques for different text types and practice identifying them really quickly. Remember, MEST is best. MEST is best. Modality, emotive language, syntax, tone. I've got a video on that as well. How do you find techniques really quickly? You need to know enough techniques and you need to practice doing it. And then thirdly, you need to know how to link. You need to know how to link those techniques that you are able to find on the day to the key terms of the question. So you need to know how to expand on a key term that is provided in a question so that you're not repeating the question. The last thing you want to do is repeat the question. You need to expand on the question. And there are a couple of techniques to that. I also covered how you can do that in that recent section 1 video. Hopefully that answers that one. In Mod B, for questions that mandate a poem, Hollow Man for Eliot, how do you include that in your essay? Okay. Yes. So with Eliot, you've got 5 poems that are part of the collection, and you are being examined on the collection of poetry. You're being examined on T.S. Eliot's poetry, and it includes 5 examples of the poems, right? 5 poems make up the collection. So just keep that in mind when you are formulating your overall ideas, that you should be referring to Eliot's poetry, not just to specific poems all the time. Having said that, in my draft Eliot essay, and in the essay that I would do, I would focus on 3 poems, 1 poem per paragraph, as a primary focus. That doesn't mean you can't refer to the other 2 at one point or another. Now, in terms of being asked about a specific poem, so let's say I had prepared for 3 poems as my primary poems. What I would also suggest you do, in case you were asked to include a specific poem like Hollow Man, I would know a kind of topic sentence idea for the 2 other poems, and I would know which paragraph in my existing essay they would best substitute in for. So Hollow Man might work well as a replacement for Proofrock. So I put it into my Proofrock paragraph and I kind of substitute out Proofrock. So therefore, you also need to know at least 3 quotes with a technique for Hollow Man, if that's something that wasn't in your original essay. So you've got to know a topic sentence idea and where it would substitute in to your draft if you got asked for that poem, like which paragraph would it basically replace. And 3, you need to know at least 3 quotes with a technique for each of them. And obviously I would think about what you would say about those as well, but pick 3 good quotes that you'd be able to analyze. And you do that for the 2 remaining poems, just in case you got asked about one of those specifically. So I hope that makes sense. So you have 3 poems already thoroughly integrated into your existing essay, 1 poem per paragraph. You have a backup plan for the 2 other poems in case you get asked about one of them specifically and you have to include the other one. And so that you're prepared for that, you have a topic, a sentence idea for each of the other 2, and you have 3 examples with the quotes and the techniques in your head. And you also know the paragraph that they would best substitute into if you asked to write about them. It doesn't need to be in your very first paragraph, of course, just put them into one of those paragraphs where it best fits. Justin Wong, can I learn one essay and adapt to anything, or is there an alternative? Well, the alternative isn't too pretty. That's the problem there, right? So can I learn one essay and adapt it to anything? Pretty much. I mean, only you can adapt one essay to anything if you're ready to sacrifice a lot of it, because you could get a question that really does steer you away from your core kind of focus of the piece. And if you've at least considered that kind of scenario, that worst case scenario question, you'll know where to kind of go from there, or how you can rework what you had. But look, in short, to give you the answer, yes, that is the best strategy. It doesn't mean you'll be able to adapt to anything. Depends how much you've practiced adapting. Like at this point, I've looked at so many questions. This isn't to toot my own horn or anything. I've just practiced the adaptation thing so much and gone through it with so many students that I feel like if you gave me a draft essay, or I had a draft essay, I could pretty much adapt that to any question. But the way I do it might be something that you think, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that, or that seems like crazy. That's because it's coming with years and years of extra practice of doing it. And I know how to manipulate things a little bit more, but I also know how to add in new material on the spot while still maintaining some sophistication. So there's always a trade-off there between how much you adapt and the sophistication level. The more that you try and stretch the kind of relevance of your existing essay to fit another essay. If you're stretching it, it might kind of compromise the quality a little bit. But also, if you just do away with your memorized piece and you try and write something fresh on the day and you haven't practiced that, the quality is going to be compromised there anyway. So for me, the optimal plan is to have a base essay to a question I like based on my overall understanding of it. I would make sure that my base essay is set up to be adapted to anything. And the way that you set up an essay to adapt to anything is to make sure that you're tackling the core ideas that emerge throughout the text, which sounds so obvious. But some people have these really refined ideas and they can go really well. Like you can get a 20 out of 20, you have this idea that no one else would have even considered, but it's a very narrow perspective. Whereas if you want to have a highly adaptable essay, if you're targeting the overall concepts that come out from the beginning of the text, the middle of the text, the end of the text, then they're going to be highly adaptable to any key term, any theme that you get asked on the day. Because no matter what theme you get, if you've covered the core ideas of the beginning, the middle, and the end without too narrow a focus, then of course that can be adapted to anything with varying degrees of success depending on how much you've practiced adapting, because you might not do it the right way. So yes, it is possible. Make sure you've got the right evidence in the first place. Beginning, middle, and end of the text should be reflected throughout those core ideas. And I would also make sure to include a lot of overarching kind of elements that can apply to any question. So context, if you refer to context and link things to context, obviously the context that has shaped the text doesn't change based on a question. So context is context. That either did influence or it didn't. So you can always talk about that. So I would load up my essay draft with lots of contextual influences because I know I can always use that. How I use it and what I say about it, that might change, but they are what they are. The form of the text is similar. The form doesn't change. The form is the form. If it's a play, it's the dramatic form. If it has soliloquies, it has soliloquies. Engage with form as much as possible, multiple times per body paragraph, if possible, up to 2 times per paragraph. So when you're using evidence and specific quotes, if you tie it to the overall form, that's always going to be relevant. So form is the most adaptable form of evidence. So if you use quotes, try and make sure it links to some aspect of the overall form or style of the text. And also make sure you're using lots of context, because context is always going to be relevant and always give you bonus points. So look, there are a few thoughts on that. I think the essence of what I'm really saying for this one, can I learn one essay and adapt to anything? If it's the right essay, if it's not too narrow, if you have covered the core concepts that emerge throughout the text, beginning, middle, end, body paragraph 1, 2, 3, problem, consequence or response, resolution. If you use a problem, consequence or response, and then resolution framework for the bodies 1, 2, and 3, and your ideas relate to the problem, then your ideas in body 2 relate to the consequence of that problem, and then you talk about whether there was a resolution at the end of the text, all of that is going to be relevant to any question, guaranteed. So yes, you can learn an essay and adapt it to anything if it's the right essay, if you have the right structure and framework in place, and if you've used a lot of context and form, because they are going to be relevant no matter what. All right, our school recommended an essay structure poem ABC in different paragraphs, so that's what we are working with. Was this a follow-up for Hollow Man? Yes, well, ABC works. That's what I was recommending anyway. For Elliot, I would do 3 poems, 1 poem per paragraph, and we've talked about how you can prepare or ensure yourself against the possibility of being asked about one of the other poems that were not in your draft essay. What is the best way to come back and achieve an okay mark? I love it. Let's send the bar a bit lower here. If you have to fix your essays a little bit, what is the best way to come back and achieve an okay mark if you have to fix your essays a little bit? Trying to make sure I understand where you're coming from here. Well, first, yeah, let's aim for a good mark. All the advice, all the tips should be aimed towards a high mark. Sorry about the background noise. I don't know why there's construction work happening right now outside. If you have to fix your essays, I need a bit more context on this one. So Delta Viz6, if you can follow up at the bottom, I'm going to just scroll down in the comments. If you can give me a bit more context on what you mean there, give me an example of the scenario you're talking about so I don't answer the wrong question, that would help. So if you're still on, send me a follow-up question on that one. Okay, a lot of questions coming through. This is awesome. I'm going to go rapid fire on these. How many quotes should I use per paragraph in an essay? At least 3, up to 4 is safe. If you're a super fast writer, you might be able to use more. But remember, a quote as an example is different to general use of quotes, because you want to have 3 to 4 quotes per paragraph as your examples with techniques. So those quotes have to have techniques, but you can also try to embed other quotes in the same sentence that don't have a technique, but they're there to kind of supplement your own analysis, almost replacing your words in terms of explaining the effect of that other quote. So you can have a quote that is being used as your core technique, but then you can have a quote towards the end of the sentence that also kind of supplements it. So the minimum amount of quotes is kind of 3 to 4 per paragraph, but then you can use additional quotes embedded throughout, especially shorter quotes. I hope that's making sense. I'm going to see if I can actually show you an example on that one. Just as I say, rapid fire, I realize when I answer something, I like to give a clear picture of what I am talking about. So I feel like I have to pull up an example here. Just give me a second. I'll see if I can find a very quick example for you. Let's see. Bear with me here, folks. I will get to the other questions shortly, but I feel like everyone would benefit from a nice example here. So let's do it. I've got an example for you. Here is how you can use a quote in a more creative way. Okay, this will really elevate the quality. Even if now you're a week out of trials, if you can just add in a couple of these, this could definitely give you an edge. All right, where are we? Does not like that. Okay. Off to a good start here. Here we go. Boom. Let's make sure this is coming through for you. All right. Have a look at this example. This is how you use quotes, okay? Look at the bottom one. Tony's use of a metaphor to characterize Harry as a shell of himself. See how there's a metaphor here? The first quote is a metaphor. It has a technique. Reveals the extent to which Harry's morale had depleted after returning from the ashes of war. See that little ashes of war bit? It's just adding a little bit more textual engagement, a little bit more flair and sophistication. Even though ashes is just a single word quote, it doesn't need to have a technique, but it's adding more flair to the response. So I love using these little one-worders in my explanation. This whole bit at the end is the explanation. If you can pepper these in alongside your primary quote, which was the metaphor, then that's even better. But in terms of how many quotes do you need, like the metaphor here, a shell of himself, I would have 3 to 4 of those per body paragraph, and then try and pepper in these little one-worders, or they're not always one word. It could be a few words, but I like short quotes over long quotes any day. Even for the techniques here, look how short that quote is, a shell of himself. So that's how I would think about examples and quotes. Let me know in the comments if that is making sense, what I mean by the 2 different uses of quotes, because there's primary quotes with the technique, and then there's the ashes bit at the end. That's just gives you that little bit of extra something, you know. How long will it take me to memorize 3 essays? Well, depends how fast or good you are at memorizing. I would always allow kind of 3 to 4 hours of dedicated time, focused time, undistracted, in a room, locked in a room, no distractions, 3 to 4 hours to kind of get my head around it. And again, it could take longer. So 3 to 4 hours is the bare minimum that I think I could do an essay in if it was like 800 to 900 words. So I basically each evening this week, each night, if I had 3 essays, I'd be allocating at least an entire night to memorizing each one. You probably need a day and a half, though, realistically. Could be like 4 to 5 hours cumulatively to really get it in there. But that's if you're doing it like word for word. You don't have to do it that way. The other option is you learn the kind of, I definitely memorize the introduction, which could take about, 20 minutes of focus time. Write it out, learn the topic sentences, let's say another 20 minutes. excuse me, and then memorize a table of your quotes, your techniques, and the kind of rough idea of what you want to say. Maybe it's a key term that's going to trigger your memory, and then you can practice doing an essay with that. So you can just learn kind of the bones of the body paragraphs, but I would definitely memorize the introductions and the topic sentences. So that, again, it's a couple of hours either way, but it could be 4 or 5 hours total if you're trying to get the full essay in there. And then you got to do that 3 times. So, you know, you've still got enough time to do that. I wouldn't wait till Sunday to start memorizing. You would need to start doing that ASAP from tonight. Every night you've got to be looking at something and learning something if you want to get it done in time. I can write my essays out in 34 minutes. Amazing to see that. Anyone else watching should be taking note. 34 minutes is a great target for your essay drafts. If you haven't sat down and at least written out one essay in a timed condition to figure out how many words you can actually write in 32 to 34 minutes, you're in big trouble and you'll probably not finish your exam because you're not prepared enough. You haven't done the one basic thing, easy thing, sit down, time yourself writing it, and cut down your essays so that it fits within that 32 to 34 minute mark. If you haven't done that, you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage against people like Smelly Fortnite Feet. It's a smart man or woman. I don't know. I don't know why I should man. Smelly Feet, kind of gross. Okay, I can write my essays out in 34 minutes, but when trying to adapt it, ends up being 45. What should I do? Okay, yeah, I should have finished the end of the sentence there. So it ends up being 45. That is a great message though for everyone. Even if it's 34, if you take longer to adapt, it ends up being 45. This is how easy it is to run out of time in an English exam because people underestimate the time to adapt. There's 2 things you need to do here, right? You can cut down the draft time and you can also cut down the adaptation time. How do you cut down the draft a little bit more? Go back to your conclusion, cut that down to 1 or 2 sentences at this point because you need to get a conclusion down, but 1 to 2 sentences. If it's more than that, definitely cut that first. You can probably cut the last link sentence from your last body paragraph. So conclusion shortened, last body paragraph shortened. If you need to take out any evidence, take out the last piece of evidence from your last body paragraph because on average, that will have the least impact on your mark. The marker has probably already got a really solid understanding of where you're at in terms of total mark by that point. So you just want to wrap up the essay neatly with a conclusion and you'll be sweet. I wouldn't start cutting lines out from your introduction if it's only 4 sentences as it is. I would leave that. So I would cut from the bottom up in terms of priority, and that might give you, another minute or 2. Does that get you to under 40? Not necessarily. So what else do you need to do? You need to practice doing a couple more adaptations because you were probably spending too much time at points thinking about how you could adapt. And that's really good to do now, but you want to get faster at that. The one tip to get faster at adapting is the tip is to learn your essay as well as possible because the better you know your essay, the faster you are at adapting. That's why I'm still a huge fan of learning an essay because it makes you faster at adapting because you understand what you're working with. It's already in the back of your mind. I know the sentence structure. I know where I can change it. You're going to be faster if you know what's coming versus trying to remember your original or remembering quotes. It's just a waste of time. So if you learn that draft really well, I guarantee you'll shave 3 to 5 minutes off there as well, and that should be fine. But go for maybe 32 minutes on the drafts then, cut from the bottom up, and then in terms of adapting, the better you learn that draft essay, the faster you'll be on the day. And especially if you look at a couple more questions and do introductions and topic sentences, which take up the most time by far in terms of adapting, because they need to be adapted the most, that will save you a lot of time as well. So sounds like you're in a really good place, Smelly Feet, but let's make them happy feet by doing a few more questions, a few more introductions and topic sentences. All right. How do I quickly adapt my essays on the day? And how do I stop myself from just writing the essay I've memorized and actually engage with the question? Okay. Well, similar question here, isn't it? First of all, how do you stop yourself from just rewriting the essay you memorized? It's to have confidence that you have time to spare to adapt, which means the first step here is to time out your essays and cut them down so that they're, like Smelly Feet, 32 to 34 minutes. If it's 32 to 34 minutes and you know that for a fact, you will know logically you have time to think and adapt to the question. if you have not timed out your essays, and if you don't know how long it will take you on the day, then you will stress and panic on the day and just write out the pre-prepared essay. And of course, you're going to be marked down hugely for that if it doesn't respond to the question directly. So you need to time your essays and cut them down so you know logically you've got time to spare on the day. That then gives you that peace of mind. You still need to move super quickly on the day. You don't have any time to spare, but it gives you the peace of mind to know, hey, I've got time factored in to change parts of my essay. So cutting it down and making sure you feel confident in having that spare time is the number one thing to do. And then how do you get better at engaging with the question? You practice looking at different types of questions for each essay, up to 3 as a guide. And then you practice rewriting new introductions and topic sentences and adapting every single sentence out of your introduction and topic sentence to the keywords of the question. And you practice integrating them into your sentences in a meaningful way while still trying to preserve a lot of what you had so you can still make the same fundamental argument. So even though you're rewording your piece in response to the new key terms of this question, you're still preserving the fundamental ideas that you wanted to explore, which means you can still use all of your evidence and still make the same underlying argument. That's what's happening. You're just rewording things, changing the emphasis. Yes, you'll make a different argument perhaps, but the ideas beneath it are the same, which allows you to preserve your body paragraph structure, which is what we want. Any advice on what to do in study periods? I have 2 hours a day, but the environment is too social for me to do things that require high levels of focus. Look, unfortunately, I was exactly the same. The study periods at school were never spent studying when I was at school, just because I could not concentrate in that environment. I was someone who had to lock myself in a room at home for hours to get things done. I had to, was always phone out of the room, no distractions, sitting there. My mom would bring me in food occasionally, bring me in dinner even, because I'm just like locked in there. It's the only way I could focus and get things done. So that was me. I could not do anything at school. If I was in the library, I would be just socializing or joking around with friends. So some people can study in those social environments. I never could. I really could never do it. So that's a very individual thing. So I was like you. What do you do in those periods then? I mean, I wouldn't set the bar too high because you're in this social environment. If you can get into an isolated place, why don't you go to another room? Like sometimes what I would do if I wanted to get work done, I would take myself out of the library if you're able to, go and find a quiet area where there is no one else around, and then set one kind of goal for that study period. Don't expect to get as much done in that 2 hours because you're still in a different environment. That's not ideal. But I would try and get out of that environment and into a more solitary spot where you can at least achieve maybe one kind of goal for that study period. So that's what I would try to do. You honestly have to just remove yourself from the distractions. You have to get out of the environment. That's the only thing you can do. So do your best to do that. Otherwise, you'll have to compensate it with some more study at home. What do I if I'm given a question that talks about one specific theme? Mercy, how am I meant to write all my paragraphs on that? Well, there's a good chance you all will get at least one essay question that focuses on one specific theme, such as mercy. This is where people become unstuck, right? Because they think of their essay as being 3 paragraphs on 3 different themes. But remember, you should be using a framework that moves through the ideas of the text based on the problem that's established at the start. Body paragraph 1 should always be about what's the core problem? What's the tension here? Then what's the consequence of that problem? Is there another problem? Do people respond to that problem in a certain way? And then towards the end of the text, 3rd paragraph, what's the resolution if there is one? Because that's how texts unfold more or less, right? Collection of poetry is a bit different, but you can still use that same framework. You have to, if you're following that framework, it doesn't matter what theme you get. If you're talking about mercy, then you think, what's the problem or tension associated with mercy? Is it difficult to offer mercy in certain situations? Why? Are you being manipulated via mercy? Like all the negative things that could be the problem, that's you link mercy in the problem sense in your first paragraph. Then you think, oh, my second paragraph was about, I'm trying to think, I want to relate to you here. You're thinking my second paragraph was not about mercy. It was about how individuals tend to rebel. Okay, so you talked about rebellion, and yet you get this question on mercy. Well, how does your idea as a response relate to mercy? What you're trying to do is link the theme to each of your paragraphs, and hopefully you've got that nice progression as we talked about, but you're linking the one specific theme to the three ideas of your essay structure, okay? And the better you can find that connection, the better you will go. So how does mercy relate to rebellion? I mean, it will depend on your text, of course, as well. But in terms of having mercy, how does mercy relate? Can you rebel by offering mercy? Is that a form of rebellion? Maybe if you're in a society that doesn't want people to be merciful, actually being merciful might be a signal of kindness, of humanity. And if you're in a totalitarian society, maybe they don't want people to have the quality of mercy. So maybe rebellion is actually expressed through mercy in the text if you're in a totalitarian state. So I'm just offering some ideas here. It would depend again on what you're actually studying. I wouldn't be able to tell you specifically without knowing your text and how you've used it. But yeah, and also if you wanted to talk about a problematic society, if you were talking about the problem in your first body paragraph, and you thought, I only talk about mercy in my third paragraph. How can I talk about it in my first paragraph? It's about hate. Okay, so it's a lack of mercy. You need to be creative with how you interpret the keyword of the question. So if I get mercy, I always think about it in the negative sense as well. A lack of mercy, an absence of mercy. You see? That allows you to actually take the negative perspective on it. And then when you get to the end of your essay, you can say, actually, the answer, the solution here is to offer mercy to each other. So it's having mercy versus a lack of mercy, which you established at the start. So you're playing with that key term and you're kind of twisting it to fit each body paragraph idea. And you're going to look at it you're going to like kind of take a different angle on it at each of those points. I hope I'm making sense on that, but that is a really key thing that you all need to practice. That's why I suggest doing lots of topic sentences. That's why I suggest doing lots of topic sentences so that you are familiar with how you can take one theme and make it work for each paragraph. I found that some of my essays, even my creative, is not really adaptable due to difficulties I've had in exams. What to do from here? Well, the question is it that the piece was not adaptable, or it was that you didn't know how to adapt it? So there's the skill of knowing how to adapt, and then there's, hey, the piece that I have is just not adaptable. Rarely is the answer that your piece is not adaptable. It's just that you did not know how to adapt it because maybe you hadn't done enough practice, or you didn't have the kind of skill set, like using life. Again, that video on how to adapt to any module C on YouTube that I did with life, that you should watch that, because maybe you weren't thinking broadly enough about how you could have interpreted the question, or you could have interpreted the stimulus for a creative. So often the problem is not the base piece. It's just you don't have the skill set. You haven't practiced it enough. And this is the case for most students. You haven't practiced it enough to actually know how to adapt what you have. I don't know if rewriting another essay is going to answer your problem. So that would just be a waste of time. If you don't understand the fundamental skill of how to adapt, then it doesn't matter what kind of draft piece you have, because you're not thinking about it the right way. My guess is you need to think a lot more broadly about how to interpret the question. You need to make the question work for you. And that means you need to think, how could mercy work into my essay? Even though I haven't talked about mercy, for taking the previous example. How could my essay be about love, even though I never say the word love? There are people who wrote essays on the Crucible, and they got an essay question about love. And they said, well, the Crucible, how is that about love? It's, it's such a kind of troubling text. It's cautionary. It's it's not dystopian as such, but it's like a tragic play. Everything that happens is really bad. And they think, how is it about love? Well, it's about an absence of love. It's about loving the wrong things. People loved their reputation more than they loved their moral integrity. See how I'm playing with the word love? Love has a positive connotation. Love has a positive connotation, which is why that question tricked everyone. But just because it has a positive connotation, oh, love is a positive thing, doesn't mean you can't make it negative. If you don't have love, that's a bad thing. So an absence of love. If you love the wrong thing, you love your reputation, you love your image more than you love your actual integrity, more than you love the truth. Okay? That's how you can play with a term and make it work for any idea that you have or any existing draft. You have to think very broadly, very flexibly about the key terms you get so that they work for you, not the other way around. Okay, so you'll have to practice that, but watch the videos that I have on how to adapt, and hopefully that will make more sense. Okay, so we've got a few questions here. I'm sure a few of you are thinking, how can I memorize so many essays? Again, you have to watch the video I have on how to memorize an essay, because that will give you the step-by-step of how to learn an essay by reading it out aloud like a speech. Maybe you wrote this comment before I already answered it before, so hopefully that has been answered, but learn it like a speech, figure out how much you want to memorize, and make sure you mainly do it out loud, because you're going to be a lot more efficient than writing it out every time. Okay, how do I get out of the B range? Lots of ways to get out of the B range. I would need to understand why you're in the B range, but one of the core reasons that people continually fall into the B range versus getting into the A range is they're not specific enough with their ideas. It tends to be too superficial. So you're saying things like, this represents the nature of power. And it's like, instead of telling me something about it, something specific or nuanced, you kind of stop a little bit early with the depth of your analysis. So try and make your analysis a little bit more specific by asking things like, what type of power? And so what about power? Like, you've got to ask those questions: how, why, so what type? And force yourself to give a little bit more in terms of the concepts. Also, when you're referring to context and form, the B range response typically will say something like, reflect in the Cold War era. Reflect in the Cold War era. The A range response will say, reflect in the ideological tensions of the Cold War era. Reflect in the psychological turmoil of the Cold War era. They're offering something specific about the era. So every time you refer to context, think, can I add something more specific about that contextual term? If you're referring to form, the B range response says, shaped by the dramatic form. Shaped by the dramatic form. Okay, dramatic form, it's a drama, it's a play, okay? Shaped by something about it. The use of soliloquies as part of the dramatic form. Okay, you've told me a feature of the form. Or you say, shaped by the visceral impact of the dramatic form, because watching a play live is very visceral. You feel it in your body. But let's go back to the other example, shaped by the use of soliloquies as part of the dramatic form. See how it mentions a feature of the form? There's those little specific wedges that are added in the A range responses that the B range responses typically omit or don't include. So focus on adding some more specific layers to your analysis, to your use of context, to your use of form, and I think you'll find that you'll get up to that A range. There are a lot of questions here. You've got Airstriker says, still memorizing essays, but you got the quotes down. Good. Quotes is always like the bare minimum, because you have to have those so you could write around them. You can't, you typically won't get away with making up quotes on a prescribed text essay. But yeah, that's the starting point. But remember, the most important things, in addition to the quotes, are the introductions and the topic sentences. Okay. Can you give tips to quickly skim through short answer text to find techniques and come up with a good analysis? Yeah, so the tips are, you zoom in. Why don't I do an example here? Who wants to see an example? Let's pull up. I can dictate these things, but it's always easier if I just show you, okay? Manit Patel says, how do I stop getting 9 out of 20? I assume you mean for my short answer. This is how you can stop getting 9, right? You can be more efficient and you can know where to look in an unseen text. Let's do it. So, guys, here's a poem, right? Here's a poem called To a City, okay? To a City. Now, imagine you don't understand any of this, basically, okay? Imagine you see this and you think, I don't get any of it. Okay, let's see what you would do, all right? And I'll put myself down here. what would I do? Well, what I would do is I would zoom in on a couple of areas that I do understand. So here's a tip for you, okay? If you're trying to find techniques quickly, I always zoom in on the first couple of lines. So to a city where I'll remember nothing but a clump of yachts, okay? So I'm just going to try and see if I can get some analysis out off the bat. To a city where I'll remember nothing but a clump of yachts. Now, I always try to remember my techniques or my tricks. Mest is best. Modality, is anything to do with modality here? To a city where I'll remember nothing. I will remember nothing. That's high modality. So already I've grabbed the technique using our friend Mest is best, okay? To a city where I'll remember nothing but a clump of yachts. Does this sound positive or negative? Notice how I'm thinking about this. Sounds pretty negative. I'll remember nothing, okay? Do I understand that? Yeah, the person won't remember anything about the city except some yachts. Okay, I've got enough information now to get a mark from this analysis. So many people, let's go back a step. So many people look at the whole poem, they think, I have no idea what I've just read. I'm freaking out. I can't even take in the words. I'm stressed. I'm in an exam. Who cares? Let's zoom in on the first two lines and ignore everything else. I can see there's high modality. I found my technique because I used Mest. If you're smart, you'll use Mest. I'll remember nothing but a clump of yachts. And now that I know it's high modality and I know that it's got a negative vibe to it, all I need to do now is think, what does this actually mean? And I can almost like reword it in different terms. This person is saying they'll remember nothing about the city. What's another way of saying that? I'll remember nothing. It's easy to forget. There's nothing memorable about it. Remember, memorable. Okay. So if the question was about how this conveys disappointment, now I can say that the high modality in I'll remember nothing conveys the persona's disappointment, right? As now we don't want to say nothing, right? But you could say due to an absence of memorable experiences in the city. So you're almost like translating what part of the quote said, and then you're making a concept out of it. Like high modality, I'll remember nothing, emphasizes the lack of significance, or because I'll remember nothing. Nothing was significant. Okay, that's your link. That's your effect. I'll remember nothing emphasizes the lack of significance to this individual's experience in the city. Okay, that's it. You said lack of significance. That will get you the mark, and you got the high modality for the technique. We found it. Okay, let's say I have no idea what any of this means, no idea what I just read. My poetry is exposed in a dazzling glare. The notebook's white page is blinding. Okay, I kind of get that. Like the notebook's white page. Why is the notebook white? Because it's empty. Because again, they were disappointed. There was nothing noteworthy. Okay, so that's a metaphor. The white page is blinding. The white page is not actually blinding them. So now I've got a metaphor. It's blinding. They can say, then you can say, we want to say a different point, not just, it's again, lack of significance. But you could say that it did not inspire any meaningful recollections. Because what do you do in a notebook? You recall things. So it failed to inspire any meaningful recollections. Great. So we're just, again, saying basically what this actually means. If you got nothing in the white page, the experience felt spiritually empty because it's a white page, it's empty. So it's spiritually empty. Okay, done. And then my war against mosquitoes won. Okay, again, like if we hadn't used metaphor there, we could say metaphor here, my war against mosquitoes. They're not actually having a war, but you could also say imagery here. Because if we use metaphor here, we could say imagery with my war against mosquitoes won. The fact that they're having a war against mosquitoes, this conveys a sense of conflict that was experienced between the persona and their environment, therefore suggesting physical dissatisfaction. Bang, we've got our 3 pieces of evidence. We had a topic sentence at the start that responded to the question, 4 out of 4. Okay, that's how you do it. That's what I mean. Let me know in the comments if that clarifies things a little bit in terms of how you can quickly go through a section 1. You don't even need to understand most of the text. That's the crazy thing. You do not need to understand it. I remember when I did section 1 back in the day, and obviously I've looked at a number of papers since with students. You don't always understand it, or you don't think you understand it, and you think there's one right answer. There's not. You just need to zoom in on a couple of parts that you do understand, that you can find a technique for, and link it to the question by thinking, what do those words actually mean? How could I translate that and tie that in with the question? Okay, that it's as simple as that, but I say it's as simple as that. You do need to practice doing that for it to become simple. All right. Now, again, we're trying to zoom through, very active chat as I hoped, as I expected, because we're close to the exam period here. Let me get through a few more questions. If I've already answered the questions, I'm going to skip past it, okay? Where would you recommend to get my essays marked? I don't need tutoring, but I find the more feedback I get, the more likely to get 20 out of 20. Yes, but I'm limited to how quick my teachers mark. Right, I don't know if you kind of wanted me to plug JeddAI here, but get onto JeddAI because go to jeddal.com, sign up to JeddAI. With the student subscriptions, you can not only get access to the AI tool, which already calibrates to the kind of band 6 requirements to let you know where you're at and give you suggested improvements, but our team will get back to you. Real life tutors will just explicitly give you feedback on your drafts to help you get as close to 20 out of 20 as possible. So if you sign up to JeddAI, even just for the month, so that you can get access to the trials and maybe you end up doing it for the HSC as well, that is a great tool. It means you don't have to get a tutor, but you still get the benefit of tutors looking over your work and giving you specific improvements to help you improve. Okay. Again, these ones, how to write a good module B essay for Robert Gray. It's a very broad thing here because we're under the pump. I'm not going to be able to give you a full layout. That's why we created jeddal.com. If you go to jeddal.com, subscribe, get Robert Gray. It will have examples of how to write a full mark essay. That's what JeddAI has on there. It has examples and it has the analysis tables showing you how you can analyze all of the different quotes so that you can get a band 6. Okay. Now, Delta Viz sick. I meant to say with trials coming up and not all of my essays done, what can I do right now to come back and make? I like the concept of the comeback. It's good. And make progress before my trials. I like the redemption arc that you're on right now. So I do want to help. I meant to say the trials. Again, right now, if I have 5-6 days before the exam, I'm trying to get something of a scaffold for each essay. So 3 essay scaffolds, even if it's not fully fleshed out, a really good introduction for each of them, topic sentences with a clear focus for each body paragraph that maps the kind of problem of the text, the consequence, and the resolution, beginning, middle, end of the text. The 3 paragraphs I would have match up to that. And I would memorize those, the introduction and the topic sentences, and then of course memorize your quotes with the techniques and know the key term of the effect that you want to include. You don't have to memorize all of the body paragraphs, but I would at least do that. I think that's going to really pay off. That's why I'm saying that would be the number one thing I would do. I would memorize those one by one. Don't move on to the next text until you've done that. And the second thing I would do is look at a couple of different questions and practice adapting those introductions and topic sentences that you've learned to those new questions. And just going through that exercise and forcing yourself to think through the parts that you would change or how you would restructure it is going to pay massive, massive dividends on the day of the exam. Most students don't actually do it. They don't have the discipline to look at new questions and practice writing out adapted responses. They just rely on the memorized response, and you leave things to chance on the day, and that can go either way. Okay. How far out from trials should you memorize? You're 2 weeks out at the moment. Yeah, I would start from now. In the last 2 weeks, I would start familiarizing yourself with the essays. Not sure of the extent of memorization you want to do here, but I would familiarize so you feel more confident with it. Once you're 1 week to go, that's where I start to have, if I haven't already started learning the essays, every night I've got like another essay on the to-do list to like learn. 4 hours locked in the room, go, go, go. It's that kind of thing with a week out. So 2 weeks gives you time to go through it a little bit more kind of methodically, where you can actually familiarize with it, speak it out loud, look at a couple of different questions then, and start doing some adaptation practice 2 weeks out while familiarizing. And then when you get to the week earlier, you start really locking in the specifics. But that will come much easier to you. That'll be much faster because you've already spent the week before reading over it a lot, looking at new questions and practicing adapting, even though you hadn't fully memorized it at that point. So familiarizing and looking at new questions and adapting 2 weeks out. And in the last week, kind of locking in all the material that you want in there. Yeah, so for writing a reflection for Craft of Writing, just check out the YouTube video, how to write a reflection for Craft of Writing. I made a video with examples breaking down exactly how to do that. So just take a look at that and that should help. How long should it take to write with and without adaptation? Yeah, 32 to 34 minutes. Aim for 32 minutes, especially if you're a faster writer, because you can write more in the time that you're given. I would aim for 32 minutes to write out my draft essays. If they are longer than that and you time it out, which you all should, cut them down and cut them down from the bottom up. So conclusion is the least important part, shorten your conclusion. The last body paragraph is a little bit less important because it's the last thing the marker reads. Shorten the end of that. Maybe get rid of the linked sentence, reduce it by 1 sentence of analysis. That's what I would do, because you have to be realistic about how much you can actually write when trying to respond to a new question on the day. So 32 minutes is the proven mark for that. You'll only just finish. All right. All right. How many pieces analysis do we need for 3, 4, 6 marker questions to get full marks? All right. I'm only going to say this once because we're going to get through more things. For a 3-mark comprehension question, you need 3 sentences, which includes 1 topic sentence and 2 sentences of analysis. So 2 pieces of analysis, 2 techniques for a 3-marker, because you got the topic sentence at the start. For a 4-marker, you need 3 pieces of analysis and a topic sentence. 4-marker is 4 sentences, topic sentence plus 3 pieces of analysis. And a 6-marker, 6 or 7-marker, I would treat the same, is a mini essay where you have a 1-sentence introduction, introducing often the 2 texts or comparing them. Then you have 2 short body paragraphs with a topic sentence and up to 3 pieces of analysis. 6, 7 marker, 2 to 3. So 2 to 3 in each of those. Ones, aim for 3 if you can do it in the time, but often it's very tough in those time conditions to get 3 pieces of analysis per body paragraph. 2 to 3, and try and recycle some of your other evidence from your other short answers if it's on the same text. Recycle 1 or 2 of those to speed you up. But obviously you need to change what you say about it to link to the new question. And then a 1-sentence conclusion. And I would already memorize the sentence starter for the conclusion and basically know how you would start your introduction every time, and then fill in the blanks with the relevant texts and ideas. All right. How do we prepare for Module C when we don't even have the stimulus for it? Well, you don't have the stimulus, but you have a prescribed text that you've studied. You can make a draft response. So I would make a draft imaginative or discursive or persuasive, choose one, learn that, perfect it, memorize it as best as you can, and then practice adapting that to different questions, and also think, how could I change that into a persuasive or imaginative? So you just consider all possibilities. What if I got a 20 marker? What if I got a 12 marker? Know how much you would cut out of your extended draft if you only got a 10 or 12 mark composition. Consider those kind of most common possibilities or scenarios, but I would have one core draft to kick that all off. So you still can definitely prepare, and then have a look at a few different stimuli, a few different past questions, past papers, and really brainstorm and practice adapting that draft piece so you can start to really think creatively about how you could do it under time pressure. Okay. Again, skipping past things that aren't doing it, that aren't relevant. Everyone. Okay, I'm doing Keats and Bright Star, and my feedback was that my points weren't sustained throughout the paragraph. What does this actually mean for how I can prepare? Yeah, so that's common feedback, right? Not sustained. Often, again, this links to the specificity of the points, right? And not having enough layers of depth. That doesn't mean you need to have 3 sentences of analysis for one example. What it means is that your sentences of analysis are probably not building on each other. They're not adding more depth. They're just kind of taking things in a different direction. So once you introduce your first example and explain the meaning of it, see if you can deepen the meaning of that, either in the same sentence or in the next sentence with the next example. Try and take the argument further. That's how you're going to sustain the points, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of saying, here's one point, here's another point, here's another point, here's one example, here's another example. We want you to go, here's one example and here's the meaning. And I'm now going to extend that point. I'm going to give more on that connected point using this next example. So you're taking us down a journey. So by the end of that paragraph, I feel like, okay, you've really laid this out. So I've got like 3 connected points that kind of paint this broader picture about this idea. So at the moment, there's a chance that your points are just not relating to each other enough, and they should be extending. You never want to repeat the same point, but that would be one of the things I would say. But try and get more specific. Try and break down the points a little bit more. But yeah, I would say making sure that the points flow on from each other is a really key thing. So think cause and effect. Like, can you say the word consequently at the beginning of one of your sentences of analysis, such that you're actually saying the consequence of the previous point, and then providing another example of what the effect would be of from what you said in the first sentence. So test yourself using words like consequently. Could I actually say the effect of what I just said in the first one? Because that would be sustaining the point. Okay. Do I have any HSC predictions? I don't like to offer predictions because then I obviously don't want to be held accountable for a situation where you've relied on my predictions to prepare, and then it hasn't turned out that way. So I'll reserve predictions for a little bit later in terms of general predictions. I would never give like specific predictions. What I know is that if you the part of a question that often comes up that students are unprepared for or underprepared is the form part of the question. So there's often a part in the question that says something like, how does the mode of representation in the text explore power? Like, that mode of representation part is often neglected. So I would say there's a very high chance that at least one of your 3 essays will have something about form or the mode of representation or storytelling. Okay, that kind of form aspect, or voice, storytelling, mode of representation, all of that wants you to engage with how the text has been composed, how it has been composed. It's a play, it has soliloquies, it's a tragic play, the genre, or it uses first person narration, it has stream of consciousness style, it's a non-linear structure, genre, voice. All of those things I would really practice incorporating and preparing to respond to for a question, because you could get a general form question. And there's a good chance you do for at least one of the 3. The Module A questions for advanced textual conversations tend to be the broadest. They might give you extracts, but they are the broadest in nature on average. Again, I can only give you on average here, but if I look at the trend of questions there, they tend to kind of be very vague in the language, which means you can kind of direct the conversation to wherever you want, but you make sure you focus on the value of the conversation overall. A lot of students get caught up with a theme and they say, this text explores the theme in this way. This text explores the theme in this way, but they never say what was the value of the conversation, of studying them together. So questions for Module A are typically the vaguest, which will give you the most choice in terms of the theme, but you've got to make sure you don't forget about the value of the textual conversation. For Module B, the critical study or critical study for advanced, they tend to be the most specific about the text and the form. So it might talk about the narrative structure or the voice. You'll get very specific terms like that for Module B, so prepare for those. And for the common mod, that's the one where you tend to see those rubric terms used the most. So get familiar with that text and human experiences rubric, the terms like human motivations and behavior, anomalies, paradoxes, inconsistencies. I'll tell you something though. I believe for the new version of the syllabus that's rolling out in the next couple of years, they seem to have taken out the kind of paradoxes, anomalies, inconsistencies part. Maybe they didn't like it. Doesn't mean that it won't be in the HSC this year and next year, but interesting to see those like small adjustments. But the idea of storytelling and human motivations and behaviors, I think they're good things to lean into for the common module for text and human experiences. For standard, the module B close study on identity, language, culture, those questions tend to almost always include some of those specific words, like how are identity and culture related, or something like that. How does it explore the connection between culture and identity, or how is language used to explore culture? Like, they're quite basic, those questions, I have found. Module B, module A in standard. It's getting to that time of the night, right? Time of the live stream where my brain is going mushy. So standard module A, language, identity, culture, that is where you'll tend to see quite a simple question as well that includes those specific terms. So just get used to responding to questions that have those terms in it, but in a specific way. So you're breaking down the type of identity, what type of culture. Otherwise, you're going to sound like everyone else and just repeat the question. Okay, so I'm going to choose a couple more things here. We are almost at the end of the questions. Thanks so much for all the questions this evening. Again, if you need like urgent help, definitely check out jeddl.com. You can sign up to JeddAI to submit your drafts to get feedback from our team, or from JeddAI as well. You get instant feedback, and then also the resources on JeddL to help you prepare for your essays. If you feel like your analysis is not quite there and you want band 6 analysis when you're analyzing your quotes, you want those really good techniques, that is what is in the JeddL resource for each of the texts. So you can subscribe to that as well if you think that would help you. Again, these questions are tough. Jay, I really appreciate the question. You're doing HSC at TAFE. It's accelerated. I'm really behind. My teachers are all behind. What can I do now to ace and get it? Like, it's very hard to say overall what you can do to just suddenly get a 90+ ATAR. Work really hard. Create a schedule. Would be I'll give you some like general tips. Create a schedule for when you're going to study for certain things and what you need to study. And there's a video I made recently. I'm just thinking of what it was called. I think the video recently, Jay, was called How to Get a 99+ ATAR by Studying Less. I think that was the title. And it will go through the methodology that I used myself and that I continue to endorse for students to get a really high mark in a small amount of time. And it's by focusing on the right things using the 80-20 law. And that means you need to find out for each subject, what's the one task that's going to give you 80% of the reward. So, for English, it's just create a base draft essay that's timed and cut down, learn that essay, and practice doing a couple of introductions and topic sentences to new questions. And if you did nothing else, you're going to go really well just with that. And that'll help you get a 90 ATAR. If you want to get a 90 ATAR for the maths component, just do at least 6 past papers, ideally up to 10 past papers, and highlight the areas that you continue to make mistakes on, going back to the textbook on those areas, and just keep doing the past papers and do that every couple of days. Maybe every day you have to do a past paper to get to 6 to 10. But if you just do 6 to 10 past papers for maths, it's going to help you get closer to a 90 ATAR if you did nothing else for maths, but just past papers and marking it and looking at the solutions. It's finding that 80-20 activity. That's what you have to spend your time on. And then you make a study schedule that's realistic for you. And you say, I'm going to do 2 hours here. I'm going to do a maths past paper here. Stick to the schedule. And I'm sure you can get the 90 ATAR actually quite easily if you can stick to that schedule and focus on the right things. For module B, in terms of rubric ideas, if you have a look at it, there's not that many significant terms that are in there. There's textual integrity, which is, how does everything in the text work together to kind of give it its overall meaning, and why do we still study it? That's just talking about how the form reinforces the themes. So the way that it's written, how does that help convey the ideas? That's textual integrity. The enduring value of it. Why do people continue studying the text, like Artists of the Floating World? Why is that still of importance? And what are a couple of critical perspectives? Like in terms of Artists of the Floating World, it's a postmodern text with this kind of post-war setting. How do those two things work together? That's really it. You've got to remember that it's a personal response, even though it's a critical study. They want a personal response, not meaning you need to say the word I or my understanding or my response, but meaning they don't want to hear you citing heaps of different critics throughout the response. They want it to feel like it's your argument that's been informed by you researching other people. It just has to sound like that. So you don't have to obsess over referring to critics or critical perspectives, although you can definitely drop in a couple of terms when it's relevant, like, post-colonial or postmodern. Those kind of general terms are definitely useful, but you don't need to feel like you have to have specific critics. But there's no real specific terms in the Module B rubric, to be honest. It's all about understanding the form, how it's been written, the context, why it was written, and what those key ideas are in terms of the kind of problems that it's exploring, and how the individual, like Ono, how does he navigate it in that world? What are the messages that come out from that? But really lean into the form, like the subjectivity, the first person, the unreliability of the narration there, the vignettes, the non-linearity, this idea of self-deception coming out. It's just about having a real deep dive into those ideas and how the form and the style reflects that, and then how that links to context, which is what you're meant to do with every essay. So Module B is kind of the vaguest, but the questions are the most specific about the text. So you just need to know the text really well and how it's been written really well. Like, what are all the aspects of structure, style, genre, because they could be asked about in the question. Okay, if for T.S. Eliot, the question uses a quote from a specific poem, do we need to use that poem in our response? That's a good question. I would really look closely at the whole question, obviously, because it might say with reference to the extract and the poem. It might, if it mentions the poem itself, other than just in the brackets of the extract, then yes. But if it's in the extract and it gives you the poem, it's definitely worth talking about an idea or a concept that comes out of that extract. But the key is to relate it to Eliot's poetry as a whole. Remember, you're studying Eliot's poetry as a whole, and if it gives you a little extract from one specific poem, but it doesn't say you have to mention that poem, it just says with reference to the extract, then you can analyze the extract, talk about the idea that comes out of it that relates to the overall poetry, and you can mention that in the introduction even. I would still incorporate a specific piece of analysis in my paragraph if it's an extract, showing how I'm analyzing that poem, but I would put it in where I feel it best fits my existing structure. And then I would continue to refer to the idea of the extract, maybe the fragmentation that's evident in the extract, and then I would focus more on my other poem. So yes, focus on the extract or the poem of the extract to the extent of the key idea that's in it, but I would try and relate it more to the overall ideas of the poetry, and then use your core examples. But do include at least one specific piece of analysis based on that quote, two if you can. If it asks you to refer to the stimulus in your response, have at least two specific references, maybe for two of the paragraphs, or maybe you do one reference. Depends how many lines they give you in the extract as well. Like if they give you 2 lines only, maybe you only have to refer to it once or twice outside of the introduction. But if it's a little bit longer as an extract, maybe I'll try and quickly find 3 different aspects that I could refer to and use them at different points in the essay, maybe 1 per paragraph. So it would depend how much they give me in terms of how much I would respond to it, but that would probably be the max, once per paragraph, if it didn't ask me to specifically refer to that whole poem, because it's more just a reflection of the poetry than asking you to reference the poem itself. Airstriker, how do you analyze an image? Secret chocolate sauce, SCS, salience. What is the thing that stands out in the image? Maybe it's because it's in the foreground, like my hand right now is pretty salient. I'm not salient because I'm in the background. What stands out? Salience. Contrast, secret chocolate sauce. C for contrast. 2 things are contrasting. What's contrasting here? The blue background, my face. Contrast can also be lighting. Let me see if I can create some contrast here. Oh, there we go. Look at that. That's a bit of chiaroscuro lighting there. See the shades? It's a bit darker in the corner there. There. So chiaroscuro lighting. There's a contrast between dark and light. And then S for symbolism. The final S is for symbolism. So this is SCS, secret chocolate sauce, salience, contrast, symbolism. What does something symbolize? If there's an image, someone with their phone. The phone symbolizes technology. Yippee-ki-yay. There we go. Okay. So happy days. Almost 2 hours Q&A. Love it. Thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to wrap it up there, but really appreciate the questions. Always fun jumping on and responding. I hope you found that helpful. Guys, important though, really important. I'm going to do a special day before the exam session live stream. I believe it's going to be 5 p.m. Sunday. 5 p.m. Sunday, jumping on. We'll look at some section 1 questions, look at maybe some common mod essay questions to prepare you for that paper 1. Now, don't prioritize that over, if you're still learning your essays and you need to spend time memorizing, definitely do that and practice doing other questions. But if you feel like you would benefit the night before, just to sit down, watch a live stream with me, walking through some questions, how I would respond to some different short answers, how I would think about breaking down some common module essay questions, that could be helpful. So I'll do that around 5 p.m. I didn't want to make it too late because you might want to jump on and then do some more revision. You should definitely be reading over your essays before you go to sleep so it plays over in your head while you sleep. That's when you get a lot of the reps done as well. So don't rely on waking up early in the morning on the day of your exam to refresh yourself, because your brain when you're asleep is going through all of those things that you looked at right before you went to bed at a multiplied rate, so at an accelerated rate. So what you should do is, if you were going to wake up early or stay up a little bit later, I would definitely stay up a little bit later to go read through that essay, because when you go to sleep and you wake up, your brain has already done all these extra repetitions as you slept, versus getting up in the morning and trying to cram it in as you're waking up. It just is not a good idea. So keep that in mind as well. So Sunday evening around 5 p.m. check-in should be on the live stream here. And can I just send my essays for you to memorize, please? Well, there's a lot of essays now. I've had to work on a lot of essays with a lot of different students at this point. But if you want to see the exemplar essays or parts thereof, and you want to see Band 6 analysis, JeddAI.com has the resources there. You just go to the close analysis parts. There's the tables. It has all of the sentences of analysis there. I mean, that is one of the most helpful resources that you could get, in my opinion. And you've got JeddAI as well if you need feedback on your actual essay draft. So we've tried to build that as like the ultimate revision tool. Please do use it if you can. And we'll see you Sunday, 5 p.m. for the live stream. JeddAI.com for resources, for JeddAI feedback from our team if you need drafts. Jump on there. What can I do? For anyone that's still on right now and wants to potentially sign up, let me see. What can I do for you? I'm going to give you a discount code right now if you sign up in the next day. Could be tonight or by tomorrow. Let me give you something here. So you can use this for JeddAI or a JeddAI resource. I'm going to put live stream as the code. What am I going to do? Something crazy? Okay, we'll do. Let me think. I'm thinking what we can do. So we can do probably 30% off if you sign up in the next couple of days. That's a pretty good deal. You know what? I'm just going to do it tonight. It's 50% off after this call. This is just for those of you who are still on. Live stream 50, set it up now for you. If you want to jump on, if you want access, last minute access to the resources, live stream 50 will give you 50% off the resources or JeddAI access. I'm only leaving that on tonight. Definitely not meant to just do that, but I appreciate you guys jumping on and being part of this. Let me set it up for you while we're on here. So if you need to get some quick material to enhance your drafts before you start learning them for any of your essays, live stream 50% off on JeddAI.com, the only place to do it. And I hope that helps. I'm going to set that up right now so you can use that. I'll see you guys Sunday evening. That's pretty much it. In about 2 minutes, that code will go live and it will no longer be live tomorrow. So enjoy if you happen to get access to it. I'm I'm going to stay on while I set that up for you right now, just to make sure it's all working. Let me know any other questions that you guys have in the meantime. Other things that you want me to focus on Sunday. What would help you the night before, the evening before the exam in terms of preparation? What would you want me to do? What would you want to go over? Do you want to go over breaking down some questions? Tell me what would help. How are we going here? Not quite live yet with the discount offer. Give me a second. Adaptation of essays. Yeah, going over some adaptation techniques. Maybe I'll pull in like an example of a draft of a past response and show you how I would actually tweak it in real time to a question. Would you find that helpful? If I grabbed like a sample thesis, showed you a question, and showed you how I would actually change it if I got that new question? Adapting thesis and topic sentences. Yep, we'll definitely go through some of that. Can you also cover year 11 prelim? Yes, but probably year 11 prelim. We won't focus on Sunday though. So wait till the next live stream for that. It might not be the Tuesday directly after, but the following Tuesday, we will focus on that. Everyone else have finished my English trials. Well, congrats on finishing, but you still got the HSC ahead of you. Hope they went well. You must have done them, what, in the last 2 weeks, as soon as you went back to school, or you did them at the end of last term. And now you've got a nice chunk of time to prepare for the HSC. Definitely have a break though. I would recommend having a couple of weeks to unwind, but you've probably got to cover more content unless you've just sped through all the content in class, because that hasn't been a lot of time to cover everything. Okay, I think we're live now. So live stream 50 if you want 50% off access to any of the resources. So any essays you feel like you could improve or you need help on, or even for JeddAI if you want to just use it for a month. Pretty crazy offer actually, because you're getting access. You can submit your drafts to a team of tutors to look at your work and tell you exactly how you can improve them. 50% off. You can just do the monthly, and also you can subscribe to any of the resources. So jeddal.com livestream 50 is the coupon code. Only going to work tonight. It's only going to work tonight, just because I felt like doing it, because I've enjoyed the live stream and appreciate you all being on here. Do I have any tips for Mod A, specifically the Richards? I mean, lots of tips. Again, if I was going to structure a textual conversations essay for it, it would depend if you're a fast writer or a slow writer as well here. But four body paragraph structure might work if you can write fast enough. Split the essay up into 2 halves. So half one, half two, you've got two different themes, and you're exploring how each text represents each of those themes. And you obviously want to move from like something a bit more kind of negative. Maybe it's the challenge of power and how that's represented in each one. And then maybe something moving forward from that towards a sense of freedom or some kind of resolution, and how each of those reaches that. But the key thing to remember with Richard's, right? With looking for Richard, it's funny. It's more about the power is more Pacino's power and the way he's exploring, cultural authority, and he has the power over our interpretation of Richard III. It's quite an interesting kind of representation there. But you definitely want to talk about the power of Shakespeare as a play in terms of its cultural relevance. That's like how the power of the literature is explored in Looking for Richard in one sense, whereas power is explored in a very different way, of course, in a much more kind of aristocratic sense and traditional sense, when you look at Richard's motivations and the fact that he wants to exercise power and he manipulates his way to power, but then he's consumed by guilt and conscience. So you could also talk about morality and how morality has changed from the kind of medieval values, and also you could talk about moral relativism in terms of morality, and then how in a secular society, how has Pacino represented morality? How has he changed the scenes to kind of accommodate a more secular perspective on morality versus maybe the Christian perspective that was put forth there? So there's lots of different things there. I know I was a little bit scattered in terms of the ideas, but hopefully you can kind of latch onto something there and use it in your piece. Is monthly billing of JeddAI supposed to be 19 a week, more expensive than weekly? I think the other one is annual, I think is what you're saying. So it's like 19 a week, or it's $9 per week if you were doing it annually, like a year subscription. So I'll double check that, but I mean, take advantage of the mistake if there is one you can take advantage of until it's fixed. But thank you for telling me. I think it is fine. I think it's just cheaper if you do it annual subscription versus month to month. Hugo, impossible to say if they'll specify a specific poem for Eliot. You need to be prepared for that. I've talked previously in this live stream what to do to prepare. You'll probably have 3 core poems, one poem per paragraph in your essay, and then you're going to have 2 backup paragraphs. But you don't have to have full paragraphs. You just need to know the topic sentence idea of each of the other 2 poems that isn't in your draft, where it would fit into your existing essay draft, like which poem would you substitute out so that that poem could go in. And then you need to know 3 quotes with techniques and have practiced kind of, or have thought about what you would say about each of those to create a paragraph in a worst case scenario where you're asked about one of those poems that wasn't in your original draft. So it's got to be prepared for all 5. You've already got 3 in your draft, and you know the ideas and 3 pieces of evidence from each of the other 2 that aren't in the draft. Then you're prepared for all bases. How likely is it? It's possible. It happens occasionally. I couldn't say, I couldn't really give you a percentage, to be honest, because it would depend on what trial you're doing, your school, what your previous assessments were, what your teachers want to focus on, and it's also just random. Yeah, so if you've got trials on Monday, a lot of people have trials on Monday. Search up right now how to memorize an essay, JeddAI, and you can see the video where I break it down step by step. It's got everything there. Learn it like a speech. Be disciplined. Go into an environment with no distractions. Lock yourself in a room. Commit to the process. It's going to take a few hours per essay to do. When I say to know the topic sentences or know the topic sentence ideas, I mean know roughly the concept that you would want to talk about in relation to each of those poems, the ones that you haven't included in your draft. And ideally, you could almost substitute the poem into one of the existing draft topic sentences, and it would still work. Like maybe there's a topic sentence that also works for one of those other poems, and you could just put the evidence in there and use much the same topic sentence, because it's a very similar idea that's represented in that poem as the previous poem. So I just mean know an idea, know a concept that you would link to that poem, but you might be able to reuse one of the existing topic sentences if you were to substitute the other poem out for this new poem. Do we need to be doing past papers in full, or is writing out skeleton draft okay? I wouldn't do past papers in full too much at all, to be honest. For English, the best thing you can do is learn your draft really well and then do introductions and topic sentences to new questions. So if I would look at a past paper and I would force myself to write out the introductions and the topic sentences for each of the essays. And then, yes, for Module C, I think it is worth in Module C to do some full write-outs, adapting the different parts to the new stimulus. But for the essays, introductions and topic sentences are where you get the most bang for your buck, and it means you can get through more practice versus writing out the full essay every time. That's going to take you 2 hours per section of paper. If you do that for both papers, 3.5 hours if you just did full past papers. So instead, you can just do the introductions and the topic sentences, and you can get through like 5 times as many questions, and you're practicing the most important parts that need to be adapted on the day. So introductions and topic sentences, don't do the past papers in full, nor is it sufficient to just do a skeleton. By doing the topic sentences, you're kind of mapping out the skeleton each time anyway. You can, of course, if you have time, practice a full essay and practice adapting your evidence and everything else as well. I'm just trying to emphasize the parts that matter most. Chris the Destroyer, how would you answer T.S. Eliot questions on textual integrity aesthetics without just putting the keywords in? Well, textual integrity and aesthetics are related, but slightly different things. The aesthetics really relates to the form. So the feel of the poetry. So the fact that it's very fragmented, the modernist form we're talking about there, the broken structure, and the fact that the voice is incredibly fragmented in the way that it is kind of represented. So the aesthetics is how it's written, how it sounds is kind of the aesthetics, right? How it reads is what that means. So anything to do with the rhyme, the rhythm, the structure, the style, that fragmented style is absolutely essential to talk about. Textual integrity is about how all of those stylistic features, all of those aesthetics reinforce or play into the overall ideas. So the fragmentation of the writing represents the fragmentation of one's kind of spiritual purpose, or it reflects the fragmented psyche or the fragmented psychological state of the individual in the modern world. That is reflected by the fragmentation of the poetry itself. So the fact that the form matches the ideas of the poem, that gives it textual integrity. Everything fits together. So you don't have to actually use the words textual integrity or aesthetics. You should just be talking about the form, like fragmentation, for instance, and then talking about how that reflects the key ideas of the text. And then if you get asked about textual integrity in the question, you can, of course, say that that is what gives the poetry textual integrity and an enduring value. The intro is the most important because it's the first thing the marker reads. It's the first thing the marker reads. It sets the impression. They know exactly where you sit, what band you sit in, right, after looking at that intro. So was it a band 6 introduction or not? If you did a band 4 or band 5 introduction, forget about getting a band 6 overall. Make sense? It's kind of over before it's even begun. They've read the introduction. This is a band 5 student. This is a band 4 student. You need to start off at band 6, and then hopefully you can sustain it. But if you start off at band 5 and then your body paragraphs are amazing, but your intro just was not quite there, it wasn't it, good luck getting a band 6 still. So it matters because it sets the impression, it sets the bar, and it's almost impossible to get back to a band 6 if the intro was not a band 6. So it has to be your strongest. Otherwise, you're just chasing and trying to get back up there after having a lousy introduction that you weren't prepared for because you thought, I don't need to learn any introduction because I don't know what the question is. It's completely wrong. You do need to learn an introduction. You need to have a very high level of sophistication in your introduction. You need to have great vocabulary, and you need to be, of course, responding to the question in every single sentence, which means you need to have practiced adapting it a lot of times. All right, AN Ali, I'm in year 10. Welcome, doing 2 HSC subjects. Amazing. Good on you. Very impressive. Can you give me tips for me, especially maths, and how not to mentally torture me? So, yeah, very impressive. You're doing 2 HSC subjects, year 10, doing maths. Can I give you tips on how to not mentally torture? Well, similar advice to before, like just make a schedule, focus on the right things. You can only do so much, right? But if you're doing the right things, you're doing enough past papers, you are identifying your areas of weakness, so that the types of questions you typically are getting wrong, and then you're going back to the textbook, asking your teacher for help to fill those gaps, then that's all you can do. So, I mean, in terms of minimum amount of past papers to do well, 10, if you're trying to do really well, say for 2-unit maths, and you're doing that in year 10, maybe you're doing 3-unit, 10 past papers is always a good minimum to do, because I feel like by that point, you're almost bored of the papers. So I would do that for every assessment, your trials, and your HSC. And then know that that's all you can do. So don't torture yourself, just create a plan, map it out. Here I'm going to do the papers, here I'm going to do this. And if you schedule out what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, and you know that that is enough, and that, yes, that's a lot of practice, then you don't feel guilty when you're not doing it. The torture comes from the guilt when you're not doing the thing you think you should be doing. But if you've scheduled out the work and you've done the work when you scheduled it, you won't feel the guilt, and you can enjoy free time on the outside and be free of that torture. But of course, at times you're just going to feel stressed because there's more at stake. And that's part of the fun of it. But yeah, having a schedule, not constantly having this feeling of guilt because you feel like you should be studying, you can remedy that by having a plan, being confident with that plan, get your teacher to look at, is that enough? Yep, that's great. I'm telling you, 10 past papers, good goal. You can even do more if you give yourself enough time, space it out, and that's all you can do. And then you can enjoy your time as long as you stick to that schedule. Okay, other questions coming in here, guys, but I've got to jump off now. As I said, I'm coming back on Sunday evening. I'm coming back on to answer any other last-minute questions before your paper 1 exam for a lot of you. A lot of you have paper 1, some of you won't, but we'll do a trials-specific session there for paper 1 to get you ready for the day after. So live stream 50, that's the code I've set up just for tonight. Live stream 50, 50% off. JeddAI.com, you can sign up for 1 module, multiple modules. JeddAI, submit your drafts, get feedback. This is the only time we're running that for now because I have enjoyed the live stream tonight. So live stream 50, that's the coupon code to use at the checkout on JeddAI.com. If you want to sign up to any of the resources to get access to it, to help you prepare your drafts and to get feedback on your drafts this week. All right, appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Have a great night. I got to get home, guys, but it's been fun. What's this, 2 hours 7? I don't know if it's a record, but I've enjoyed it. It went fast, and I'll see you guys on Sunday.